He was trapped in a cycle until he burned the letter. A story by the English Story Channel. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, not a Monday when bad news usually comes, not a Friday when hope gets mailed out like coupons. A Tuesday, smack in the middle of the week when you're too busy surviving to notice the ground shifting beneath your feet. Elijah Crane found it wedged between his screen door and the rotting wooden frame of his porch in Meridian, Mississippi. No stamp, no return address. Just his name written in handwriting he hadn't seen in 11 years, 11 months, and 6 days. Elijah, that was it. One word. But he knew the hand that wrote it. He'd traced those letters in the dark once, memorized the curve of every character against the warm canvas of her palm. He'd felt those same fingers tremble against his cheek the night she left, the night she pressed a different letter into his chest and whispered, "Don't read this until I'm gone." He hadn't burned that first letter. He'd kept it in his sock drawer for 3 years, taking it out on nights when the bourbon wasn't enough, reading her excuses until the paper went soft as tissue. He'd memorized every justification, every, "It's not you, it's the timing," every, "I need to find myself in New York." He'd even booked a flight once, Delta 1847, Jackson to JFK, February 14th, 2015. He'd sat in the airport for 6 hours before driving home, too afraid to discover that finding herself meant finding someone else. But this new envelope, this Tuesday envelope, felt heavier, thicker, like it contained not just words, but weight. Elijah didn't open it. Not immediately. He carried it inside his shotgun house on 34th Avenue, past the peeling wallpaper and the stack of unpaid electric bills, past the photograph on his mantle of a younger version of himself standing in front of the old Crane family hardware store, the one that went under in 2014, the same year she left, the same year his father died, the same year the cycle began. He set the envelope on his kitchen table, poured coffee he didn't drink, stared at it until the Mississippi sun crawled across the linoleum and disappeared. The cycle. That's what Dr. Henderson in Biloxi called it. You're stuck in a narrative loop, Elijah. Same thoughts, same behaviors, same outcomes. You keep choosing the past because it feels safer than an unknown future. He'd said this during their 6th session, the one where Elijah finally admitted he still slept on the left side of the bed, the side she'd preferred, the side that remained empty but meticulously made every morning, as if she might return and find everything exactly as she left it. Elijah had stopped seeing Dr. Henderson after that. Not because the doctor was wrong, but because he was right. And being right meant Elijah would have to change. And changing meant letting go. And letting go felt like dying. So the cycle continued. He worked maintenance at the Meridian Community Center, fixing what other people broke. He ate breakfast at Waffle House on Saturdays, Booth 3, always facing the door so he could see who came in. He drove past her parents' old house on 18th Street every Sunday, though they'd moved to Florida in 2018. He kept her Spotify playlist running on his phone, the one she'd left logged in, updating automatically as she discovered new artists in whatever Brooklyn apartment she now inhabited. He was 41 years old, and he was living like a ghost, haunting his own life. But this envelope, this handwriting, this Tuesday, at 11:47 p.m., Elijah finally opened it. Not with a letter opener, he didn't own one, but with his pocket knife, the same one his grandfather had carried through Korea, the same one Elijah had used to cut the umbilical cord when his sister's baby came too fast in the parking lot of Rush Hospital. He slit the top carefully, respectfully, like he was performing surgery on his own heart. Inside was not a letter, not exactly. It was a photograph. Faded, creased down the middle, the kind developed at a Walgreens photo lab. It showed Elijah himself, 26 years old, standing on the banks of the Chunky River, holding a fishing rod in one hand and her Sarah in the other. She was laughing at something he'd said, head thrown back, blonde hair catching the late afternoon light like she'd been photoshopped into a beer commercial. He was looking at her instead of the camera, which was why his expression was so unguarded, so painfully full of love, that it made his current self ache to witness it. On the back of the photograph, in that same devastating handwriting, "Do you remember who you were before you became someone who waits?" Elijah read it 3 times. Then he turned the photo over and looked at his younger self again. That boy who built things, who planned camping trips to the Sipsey wilderness, who believed that love was something you did, not something you preserved in amber. That boy who'd once told Sarah, while they lay on a quilt in Bonita Lakes Park, that he was going to restore the old hardware store and turn it into a community workshop. "Teach kids to build birdhouses," he'd said. "Show them that something broken can be made whole again." She'd kissed him then. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." He'd never done it. After she left, he'd let the building sit empty for 2 years before selling it to a developer who turned it into a payday loan center. He'd taken the money and paid off his father's medical debt. Then he'd taken a maintenance job fixing other people's problems because fixing his own felt impossible. The photograph trembled in his hand. Not because he was crying, though he was, but because he was angry. Furious, actually, in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. Angry at Sarah for sending this, for reaching across a decade to remind him of who he'd failed to become. Angry at himself for letting her absence define his entire existence. Angry at the cycle, the loop, the comfortable prison he'd constructed from memory and regret. He reached for the envelope to tear it, to burn it, to destroy this invasion from his past. But his fingers found something else inside. A second photograph. This one was recent. Sarah, older now, standing in what looked like Central Park. Autumn leaves swirling around her. She was smiling, but it was a different smile than the river photograph. Smaller, sadder. The smile of someone who'd learned that happiness and joy are not the same thing. Beside her stood a young man with dark hair and a kind face, his arm around her shoulder. On the back, in her handwriting, "This is David. He asks about you. He wants to meet the man who taught me what love should feel like, even when it doesn't last." Elijah stared at the word last. Not worked, not succeeded, last. As if love's value wasn't in its duration, but in its authenticity. As if the 11 years they'd shared mattered not because they ended, but because they existed at all. His hand found his pocket knife again. Not to open anything, but to feel the weight of it, the history. His grandfather had carried this through a war and come home to build a porch swing for his wife. His father had used it to whittle toys for Elijah when money was tight. It was a tool for making things, not destroying them. A tool for cutting through what bound you so you could build something new. Elijah looked around his kitchen, the unpaid bills, the empty coffee cup, the mantle photograph of a store that no longer existed, tended by a man who no longer existed either. Not really. Not the essential him. He thought about the hardware store, now a payday loan center with barred windows and fluorescent lighting. He thought about the community workshop that never was. He thought about the kids in Meridian who grew up without knowing how to use a saw, how to measure twice and cut once, how to build something that outlasted them. He thought about Sarah in New York with David, sending these photographs not to torture him, but to set him free. Do you remember who you were? Not, do you miss me? Not, do you still love me? But do you remember yourself? The cycle wasn't about Sarah. It had never been about Sarah. It was about Elijah choosing the safety of grief over the risk of becoming. It was about confusing loyalty to memory with loyalty to life. It was about being 41 years old and still sleeping on the left side of a bed built for two, preserving space for someone who'd built a life elsewhere while he preserved a museum of what might have been. Elijah stood up, walked to the stove, turned on the burner. He held the envelope over the flame, watching the edges curl and blacken. Not the photographs, those he tucked into his wallet, not as relics of loss, but as evidence that he had once been capable of love that full, that open, that unafraid. The envelope itself, with its Tuesday arrival and its single-word address. The envelope that had carried the message, but was not the message itself. Burn the letter, he thought. Not the memory, not the love, just the cycle, just the waiting, just the idea that your life is on pause until someone else presses play. The envelope flared and turned to ash in his sink. Elijah washed the remains down the drain, opened his kitchen window to let the smoke escape, and breathed in the humid Mississippi night. It smelled like magnolia and possibility, like summer storms and new beginnings. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and sketched plans. Not for the old hardware store. Someone else owned that now, and that was okay. But for the empty warehouse on Front Street that had been for sale for 18 months. For a community workshop. For birdhouses and bookshelves and the smell of sawdust in the morning. For teaching kids that something broken could be made whole again. But first you had to be willing to pick up the pieces. At dawn, he called his sister in Jackson. She answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "Eli, you okay?" "I'm going to need help," he said. "And I'm going to need a loan, and I'm probably going to fail at least twice before I get this right. But I remember who I was, Maggie. I finally remember." There was a long pause. Then, "It's about damn time." Bani. 3 months later, on a Thursday, not a Tuesday because Elijah was done waiting for Tuesdays, Crane's workshop opened its doors on Front Street in Meridian, Mississippi. The grand opening was small, 20 people, mostly family, plus 3 kids from the community center where Elijah used to work maintenance. They built birdhouses that day, crooked, imperfect, magnificent birdhouses. Elijah slept on the right side of his bed that night, and the left. He sprawled across the whole damn thing starfish style because it was his bed in his life and he was finally, fully present in both. Sarah sent a card. No return address because some things don't need to come back. Just 2 words inside. Build well. He taped it to his workshop wall, beside the photograph from the Chunky River. The one of him looking at her with all that unguarded love. He kept it not as a reminder of what he'd lost, but as proof of what he was capable of. The love hadn't been wasted. It had been practice. It had been preparation. It had been the foundation for everything that came next. The cycle was broken, not by forgetting, not by bitterness, but by choosing, finally, to become the person he'd promised to be on a quilt in Bonita Lakes Park, under a Mississippi sky, before he learned that endings are just beginnings wearing disguises. Closing note. Thank you for staying with Elijah's story until the end. If this tale of breaking free, of choosing yourself over your scars, of building something new from the ashes of what once was, it resonated with you, then you're exactly where you belong. Life will send us letters we don't ask for. It will trap us in cycles that feel comfortable because they're familiar. But the bravest thing any of us can do, the most human thing, is to strike the match, burn the envelope, and remember who we were before the world convinced us to shrink. Good luck out there. Whatever you're building, whatever you're burning, whatever you're finally allowing yourself to become, may it be crooked and imperfect and absolutely magnificent. Stay with us on the English Story Channel. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about a cycle you've broken, or one you're ready to, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Every week, we bring you tales rooted in real American places, real human struggles, and real hope. You don't want to miss what we're building next. Subscribe now. Your seat at the workshop is waiting. Book written for the English Story Channel. Meridian, Mississippi, to wherever you are.